Hey guys, my name is Nate and I'm the Otter Outdoorsman, and today I'm going to be walking you guys through how I plan a meal for a trip. Let's get started. Okay guys, so first off, welcome to my office. It's currently a work in progress, but I do have plans for projects and some teaching projects I have for working in here, but currently a work in progress. So, planning a meal for the trip generally starts with me with a few different factors. So, we need number of people that you're going to be feeding. You need preservation. What type of preservation methods are going to be available to you? How many, basically, are you going to be backpacking and you're going to have, and you can only eat dehydrated meals, or are you going to be car camping and have a cooler with ice with you? Or are you going to have a refrigerator? If you're feeding multiple people, dietary restrictions. Is another important part, especially if you're feeding a giant group. And cooking methods. What type of cooking methods will you have available? So these are generally the four things you have available in front of you. So the number of people, how can you preserve your food, any dietary restrictions, and cooking methods. Now, number of people is a really big factor. If you're feeding yourself, when it's just yourself, it's easy. But in the case, I'm finishing up planning for about a 3-day trip where I'm car camping and I'm feeding about 12 people, including myself. The other thing that you should also consider in this is also how long you have time for cooking. In this case, I have all the time in the world, or at least most of the day, because on this trip, my job is literally to cook. I'm kind of the group's cook, and I just spend the day while they're out at the convention. I spend time at camp. So, as I said, the first place to start is the number of people. Now, with yourself, pretty easy. Choose, you know how much you eat. Normally, what I do when I'm feeding 2 people is I take how much I would normally eat and double it. Sometimes I do bring food for me and my friends when I go camping. So, with meat, I tend to plan for about half a pound per person per meal. Depends on the group, but I like to kind of keep it to that, unless we're going to be really hardworking. I usually then will bring foods that can feed a lot of people in our carb rich. So we'll get to that in a little bit more. So preservation. Now, if you're going backpacking, some methods is the dehydration. That is good. It has some benefits. It's, for the most part, quick. And it doesn't go bad for a long time. And that also has you can even use that in car camping situations. And I am actually going to be doing it when I get to a little bit more on it. You can use dehydrated foods. You can in car camping, and especially in backpacking. I love them on backpacking trips. because they're lighter. Another thing is obviously a cooler with ice. Now, one of the big problems with a cooler with ice is the benefits of it is you can use pretty much almost anything in there. You have to be a little more organized. The downside is you have to replenish the ice, and ice is heavy, so you can't really bring it backpacking. It's more of a car camping situation. The other thing is, and this has happened to me, if your food is not properly sealed in a container, when the ice melts, you'll have a water bath and all your food will be ruined. It's happened to me. So I tend to, my suggestion, especially with car camping, is keep foods that need to be chilled to a minimum if you are going to be out there for multiple days. Another option is cured foods. Things like ham, cured sausages like salami, pancetta, foods that have been so heavily cured that they can be stable at room temperature. That is another great way of keeping your food preserved. I actually bring, on occasion, not always, but I do like bringing salami with me on when I go camping at a base camp. It's a really nice snack. And in my upcoming trip, I'm actually going to be using ham because it's more shelf stable. But also some of the shelf stable salt pork, things like that. So cured meats is another good way of having something that's preserved. There's also the not always best things but getting canned foods. They're not always best, but sometimes they're quick, they're easy, and they don't go bad. They're shelf stable. It's great. The other thing is also, and last but not least, is finding, just going with shelf stable foods, primarily shelf stable foods. Now that can be, I find sometimes when I go to the grocery store for trips like this, for my upcoming one, I get shelf stable milk. You can also get but also go with foods that plan your meals around things that are shelf stable: rice, pasta, beans, lentils, things like that. Things that don't go bad, just sitting on the counter. So these are some of the ways of considering with your food preservation when you're planning your trip. Especially, and honestly, you don't have to pick one of them when you're planning your meals. You can do a combination. Actually, on an upcoming trip, I'm doing a combination of all of these. Now, dietary restrictions. This one is a little bit easier in when you have one person versus 12. Really is. But when you have a larger group, communication is key. Whenever I plan for these trips, the upcoming trip when we're doing a Stellafane, we have a Facebook group going, and I message everyone. I put up a post for everyone and say, what are your dietary restrictions? Do you have any allergies? Do you have any food you hate? Do you have any reason you can't eat any specific food? Religion, for example, can sometimes lead into those. And when I'm feeding for a group, I respect all dietary restrictions for the most part. That, especially because in cases like this, their day, I could make or break their day. So dietary restrictions can sometimes be tough. I mean, in my upcoming trip, I have a gluten allergy, a legitimate, I think it's celiacs, one of my friends has celiacs. Can't have any gluten, period. So I can't cook with gluten in my main dishes. One of my other friends is a super taster, one of the terms is, and it's a specific chemical compound in kale that he can taste, and it's so bitter that it ruins any food that he tastes. So I have to work around that, and last year I did that by replacing spinach with kale. Kale with spinach, and honestly, I found spinach in soup delicious, and I now I use it in soups. And I have had people with religious restrictions as well, and I respect that. I truly do respect anyone's directions towards that, and sometimes it makes me get a little creative, and that creativity has led me to some of my actually really good dishes. One of my favorites being spinach chicken soup. I can do a video on that later on, but it was a soup that I needed. I had like multiple restrictions and I had to get creative, and that soup was made out of it. And finally, cooking methods. What cooking methods are going to be available to you on this trip? I'll probably do a video on it, but I've had a question after my camp stove versus campfire video on can you feed a group of people on propane stoves, on the propane camp stoves. The answer to that is yes, you can. I've done it numerous times. And I'm going to be showing off my setup again this year in a little bit more detail. But one of the main things with it is know what methods you're going to have. And if you don't know what you're going to have, plan for the best. Plan for the worst, hope for the best. Multiple cooking methods. I mean, there's everything from you will actually have a stove. You'll have a legitimate stove and kitchen at a cabin, which in that case, planning becomes super easy because if you have a refrigerator, then it's like home. But if you're at a base camp where I'm not going to have that, I'm not going to be able to, one, I can't have a fire, and two, I don't have a refrigerator, so I'm restricted to coolers and camp stoves. And in this case, I'm using my 2-burner Coleman camp stoves, and one of my friends is bringing one of his 2 burners, so I have 4 burners, plus I think we're going to have a few other ones because we're going to bring some other camp stoves. A lot of other times, and especially with me, you also have campfires. Both of these methods really do have their restrictions when it comes to cooking. So planning around those is key. Having camp stoves, you're really stuck to kind of home-style cooking, or more of home stove range cooking, and if you have the right tools, even oven cooking. With campfire, pretty much sky's the limits. With that, though, it's sometimes harder to do some of the more camp stove cooking, where you want a little bit more control. So you want to plan your meals around that. What meals will be best utilized with those methods? So I've probably said a lot of what you've already what you probably have already know. But let me bring you down my train of thought with my coming up trip. So I'm feeding 12 people. My only way to preserve that I'm going to have, the only thing I have available to me for refrigerating is I have coolers available. And so I apologize about any spelling on this. I have horrible handwriting and spelling. But I have coolers available. And I can go down for ice. I can get ice, is going to be one of the other important things. I have gluten. I have a gluten allergy. And the other important one is actually lactose intolerance is in the group. The lactose intolerance one is actually me. But I'm eating with everyone, so I have to consider my dietary restrictions. The only cooking method I can do is camp stoves. Or propane, pretty much. But I'm going to mostly be using camp stoves. So I have 12 people. Coolers available. Ice, I can get it. No real dietary restrictions outside of gluten allergy and lactose intolerance. And I'm using camp stoves. So, with this, what are my answers? Soup. Or chili, or stew. But in this case, this year I'm doing soup. Last year I did chili and I did soup, where I did the Otter's chili and my spinach and chicken soup. This year, what I'm going to be doing, I also have to think about breakfast, but for the 2 dinners, I'm doing 2 different soups. 2 soups, I'm going to be doing one the first night, one the second night. Now, when it comes to choosing which order I plan my food, I do it off of preservation. So I'm using meats in the first one, and the second one's actually going to be a vegetable soup. So first actual meal, there's going to be the first night when we get there, it's going to be an easy meal. So it's three dinners, but it's going to be maybe about 2 or 3 people the first night. So I'm just really going to be doing sausages and instant mash, because my kitchen won't be fully set up. It's half set up right now, actually. There are people up there right now. But so first night, I'm actually going to be doing a navy bean soup. The navy bean soup has ham in it, and navy beans, and some canned vegetables. The only thing that needs to at least be chilled or made sure it's not left out too hot is going to be carrots, celery, peppers maybe. I haven't decided if I'm going to throw peppers in there, but they wouldn't hurt. But they will be in the second night soup. So first night, navy bean soup. So I'm going to be using a lot of navy beans. I'm actually going to be using a 12-quart pot on a camp stove, and it's going to be cooked pretty much all day, because I'm going to be using just a bag of navy beans, or about 2 bags of navy beans. It's going to have some canned foods in it, and it's going to have the ham. Because I can cook all day, that's going to cook for 6 hours. So the beans are delicious. Second night, I'm going to be doing a vegetable soup, a mushroom lentil soup. This one is actually one I made out of, I kind of made out of necessity, or I kind of out of curiosity and mild necessity a while back for dinner, and it fed me and Cassie for about 4 days, 3-4 days. Basically, mushrooms, lentils, beans, vegetables, tomatoes. It is a hearty vegetable soup that fills you up. And for preservation, most of the stuff in this is shelf stable, again, minus carrots, celery, and peppers. Mushrooms, I'm actually getting around to that by using dehydrated mushrooms. Actually, through Harmony House, I ordered a couple quarts of dehydrated mushrooms, one portobello and one shiitake dehydrated, and I'm going to use those so they don't go bad. So as I was explaining to one of my friends yesterday, so my mushrooms don't grow mushrooms. So those are the 2 main meals. Then for breakfasts, I'm still working that out, but this time I'm doing 2 breakfasts, which is going to be coffee and tea, obviously, I always have to have the coffee or tea, because I'm a coffee addict. I'm actually a caffeine addict. But so we're gonna have coffee and tea, per usual. Usually, if I'm planning for myself, if I'm going camping, I either bring instant coffee or I bring a tea bag with me, and I'll use that as my caffeine source. In this case, I'm actually going to be using pre-cooked bacon, because, again, I want shelf-stable foods. Most pre-cooked bacons come in a plastic bag that is shelf-stable, and that is a wonderful, wonderful thing, because I don't have to worry about the bacon going bad. And because a lot of bacon nowadays is not designed to be shelf stable, it's designed to be refrigerator stable, which because most times it's a quick cure. It's like a 2-hour cure rather than the regular multi-day cure. So pre-cooked bacon. And then this is the part I hadn't decided. I'm either going to be doing some sort of potato, or I'm going to be doing Johnny cakes, which I plan on doing a video on eventually. But that one actually will be special guested my mother, who has requested I make that video with her, because it's kind of one of her heritage things. It goes far back in my family, especially a lot of my heritage in Rhode Island, or where a lot of my family's from. I'm not from, but my family is. You know what I mean. So either Johnny cakes, pancakes, which, if I do pancakes, I have to either find a gluten-free version, or I have to do an alternative for the person with a gluten allergy. But I hadn't decided there. And, I mean, the other one could be hash browns, because potatoes are shelf-stable. So lunches in this case are basically just going to be, I'm just providing bread and deli meat, because most of the rest of my day is going to be led to these 2 meals, and people are going to be out and about at a convention. So pretty much, here is my meal plan for at least 2 days. 2 days of dinner and 2 days of breakfast. So again, it's the navy bean soup and the mushroom lentil soup. And for breakfast, it's going to be just a hodgepodge of coffee, pre-cooked bacon, and some other kind of filler. As I said, I haven't figured that part out. But that's kind of one of my thoughts, is especially with a large group, it's easier to feed them a one-pot meal. It's also, for the most part, cheaper. It's easier and cheaper and a little bit more cost-effective. Especially for feeding groups. The big trick with it is, if you're doing them, plan for high starches. They're a good way of giving them energy, good calorie-rich energy, and that's why I'm doing a navy bean soup. So it's going to have beans in it. My mushroom lentil soup will have lentils and beans in it. One of the other benefits of this camping is, and people aren't always happy about talking about this, but it will keep people regular, along with the coffee, which, when you're in the woods or when you're camping, is important. And I can tell you this from experience, these soups do keep you regular. I know, oversharing, but it's good to think about. It's definitely good to think about when you're planning meals. You don't want to clog up your friends. Breakfasts are always a challenge for me. I'm not the best at cooking breakfasts, but as I said, pre-cooked bacon, easy. With breakfast, you want to keep it easy, because especially if you're like me and not a early riser, if you're not a person who, well, I've become an early riser, but not a morning person, keep it simple. and remember to always do it in order of plan your meals in order of what's going to go bad first. And it's kind of just my thoughts and kind of some rambling of how to plan your meals for a camping trip, or for basically any type. Kind of a way of thinking about it. And these methods work for anything from an overnight hike to a multi-day car camping trip. My name is Nate. I'm the Outdoorsman. Get out there, have some fun, get out in the woods, have some fun, eat some good food, and have a good day. See you, everyone.